Welcome to MarketSquare on Veegil, that program that keeps you updated on the details of the business world here in Nigeria and globally. Before we check what we have on today's episode, let's take this break. We'll be right back. Welcome back and thanks for joining me. And on our first story, debt servicing cost 696 billion in January. That is according to the CBN. The federal government's fiscal position worsened in January 2025 with debt servicing obligations exceeding total retained revenue by a wide margin according to data from the Central Bank of Nigeria's January 2025 monthly economic report. According to the report, the federal government's debt servicing obligations for the month stood at 696.27 billion naira, while total retained revenue amounted to only 483.47 billion, indicating that debt service alone consumed about 144% of all government earnings. This development highlights the growing debt burden and dwindling fiscal space facing Africa's largest economy. Despite slight improvements in some revenue categories, the retained earnings were grossly inadequate to cover obligatory debt repayments, exposing the government's continued reliance on borrowing to meet basic obligations. A further analysis of the report showed that the retained revenue in January 2025 only recorded a marginal 0.89% increase as compared with the 479.21 billion generated in the corresponding month of 2024. While this points to a stagnation rather than growth, the marginal rise was wiped out by the overwhelming debt service obligations. The retained revenue components indicated that the federal accounts contributed 167.69 billion naira, while the VAT pool account delivered 90.73 billion. Independent revenue, a key component expected to reflect the efficiency of ministries, departments, and agencies, rose to 32.28 billion naira, presenting a staggering 61.4% year-on-year decline from 95.34 billion recorded in January 2024. Exchange gains, however, provided a lifeline as revenues from this segment grew by 35.6%, rising from 138.67 billion in January 2024 to 188.09 billion naira in January 2025. Revenues from excess crude oil sales and other categories contributed nothing to January's retained revenue despite budgetary projections, further deepening concerns over the robustness of Nigeria's revenue generation framework. Month-on-month comparison showed an even bleaker picture. In December 2024, retained revenue stood at 1.57 trillion, suggesting that January's 4.83.47 billion marked a massive 69.19% decline in government earnings without a single month. As at December 2024, debt servicing accounted for only 4.437% of total revenue. By January 2025, this figure had shot to 144%, highlighting the government's worsening vulnerability to revenue shortfalls and signaling a dangerous path toward a debt trap. In contrast, debt servicing obligations remained relatively stable between the months. Debt service expenditure of 696.27 billion in January 2025 was only 7.88% lower than 755.86 billion recorded in January 2024. However, the absence of substantial revenue growth meant that the debt-to-revenue ratio worsened sharply. This underlined the government's increasing inability to meet obligations without resorting to fresh borrowing. The International Monetary Fund earlier warned that Nigeria is facing increased budgetary pressure as a result of falling global oil prices, adding to the country's growing fiscal challenges. And on our second story, Lagos State government has signed an MOU to develop water rehabilitation projects. The Lagos State government on Monday signed a memorandum of understanding with an international consortium company, Belstar, and ENCA for the rehabilitation and expansion of water supply works in the state. In a release signed by the Director of Public Affairs of the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources, Kunle Adesina, it was noted that the Commissioner for the Environment and Water Resources, Tokunbo Wahab, said the collaboration is targeted at addressing critical water infrastructure challenges in the state. Wahab, while speaking after the signing ceremony, said the project, which entails construction, rehabilitation, and installation of water treatment facilities, as well as distribution networks, will provide a reliable and sustainable water supply to the undeserved communities. Also speaking, the Managing Director, Lagos Water Corporation, Mukhtar Tijani, said the LWC will collaborate with the international consortium, provide support for development, technical inputs, as well as stakeholders coordination to achieve success. He said the projects will not only provide potable water to communities without water, but they will also see the eradication of water-related diseases in the state. In his remarks, the Group Managing Director, Belstar Capital, Mr. Tewodros Spork, pledged that the consortium is committed to the project with the leverage on the strength and technical expertise to ensure long-term productivity and service delivery. He promised that the consortium will utilize local subcontractors in order to promote capacity building and sustainable development through the different phases of the project. And next on our story, NNPCL gets knocked as $897 million Warri Refinery revamped fails. Reports say Warri Refinery shutdown is dragging on since January 2025. Port Harcourt Refinery struggles at under 40% production capacity. This is as industry operators and experts have questioned the operational integrity of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, particularly regarding transparency, efficiency, and overall management of Nigeria's refineries under its purview. This is coming after the revelation that the Warri Refinery and Petroleum Company has remained shut since January 25, 2025 due to safety issues in its crude distillation unit. An April 2025 document on the midstream and downstream sector obtained from the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority revealed that the refinery, which consumed $897.6 million in maintenance costs, failed to produce premium motor spirit, otherwise called petrol, and was shut down barely a month after former NNPC Group Chief Executive Officer Mele Kyari declared it operational. Industry operators and experts described this as disheartening, while further findings showed that the Port Harcourt Refining Company, which resumed operations in November 2024, has been operating below 40% capacity. According to reports, the 125,000 barrels per day capacity Warri Refinery, which has been moribund for decades due to technical issues, was brought back to life by the National Oil Company on December 30, 2024. Situated in Ekpan, Uvie, and Ubeji areas of Warri, the petrochemical plant has an annual production capacity of 13,000 metric tons of polypropylene and 18,000 metric tons of carbon black. Commissioned in 1978, the WRPCs operated by the NNPC and was established to cater to the markets in Nigeria's southern and southwestern regions. Further reports say President Bola Tinubu commended the NNPCL for completing the refurbishment of the 125,000 barrels per day capacity Warri Refinery, which reportedly kicked off operations at 60% capacity. It is focused on producing and storing critical products, including straight-run kerosene, automotive gas oil, that's diesel, and heavy and light naphtha. Briefing his team before the tour, following the revitalization, Kyari had said many Nigerians doubt such projects as real or possible in the country, but insisted the revitalization was genuine and visible. Kyari said, "We are taking you through our plant. This plant is running. Although it's not 100% complete, we are still in the process. Many people think these things are not real. They think these things are not possible in this country. We want you to see that it is real." However, the document obtained exclusively from NMDPRA, providing detailed production data for each refinery in the country, revealed that the Warri Refinery and Petrochemical Company, with an installed capacity of 125,000 barrels per day, has remained shut since January 25 this year. The report linked the shutdown to critical faults in refinery's crude distillation unit. And finally, rice dealers have reported a considerable drop in the commodities price since the beginning of February 2025. According to them, a 50 kg bag of rice, which sold for 88,000 naira to 90,000 naira in January, now sells for 65,000 naira. Similarly, the price of 25 liters of vegetable oil sold for 85,000 naira in January, now sells for 66,700 naira. The price of rice has crashed by 20,000 naira as dealers reported a glut in the market after Christmas. Reports say the price of the commodity, which sold for 85,000 naira in January, has crashed to 65,000 naira per 50 kg bag. Rice dealers announced changes in price amid supply glut. And that's where we wrap it up on today's episode of MarketSquare. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on our social media handles. Stay blessed. I'm Francis Ogo.